What's up, guys? Really excited for the very first ever episode of my podcast, Not Your Mother's Podcast. I've been on a couple podcasts, I've been watching a lot of podcasts, and I thought, why don't I do it myself? So here we are, here you are. Thank you so much. I'm super grateful that you're here and that you've taken the time to check this out. To intro today's podcast, it's going to be me and my mom talking about religion, cults, and specifically the cult that we came out of. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm not going to have a super boring long intro, but I am going to let you know I'm super thankful that you're here. I'm very happy to have you along. Hope you come back for more. I will definitely be putting out more podcasts, so please stay tuned. That's pretty much it. This is the very first episode of Not Your Mother's Podcast. My name's Stuart. This is my mother, Katy, and this is the Not Your Mother's Podcast. I would like to say it's brought to you either by Jameson or Wild Turkey, but it's not. In a way it is, because I'm enjoying one and the other in different ways. But I thought it would be fun and a little bit ironic for maybe the first or at least one of my podcasts to have my mother on it, because it's called Not Your Mother's Podcast, because of the explicit nature and us being able to curse and whatnot. So it's been, my family and my mother especially have been on a pretty incredible journey when it comes to getting out of the religion, and we would call it a cult. Not all people would, and certainly not a lot of people that might see this podcast. But the religious organization that we were a part of, it's been quite a journey getting out of it. It's not Scientology, it's not something mainstream like Mormonism like you would have heard of, or Jehovah's Witnesses, anything like that, but it has a lot of similar attributes. And so she, if I remember right, my mother actually began her journey before I did, or at a very close time to when I began mine. So I wanted to talk a little bit about her journey, what she's gone through, and what she experienced inside of the cult that we were in. It's called Independent Fundamental Baptist, and I don't intend for this podcast to solely revolve around that, but we will be talking about that. She's actually done some work, and I'll link it up if I'm able in a description. She's done some work with helping survivors of abuse, whether it be physical, sexual, or even just emotional, inside of a cult-like setting, or the very cult that we came from. But I'm hogging the podcast, so let me have you just talk a little bit about that, and maybe give us a little bit of whatever you want to say about a little bit of background as far as maybe the origins of getting out, or even before that.
Okay, so I got in really because my family my parents leaned towards kind of strict religious backgrounds when we were younger. And then my older sister had followed my mother into, and then she pulled me into it. And so I ended up in a branch of the Independent Fundamental Baptist, we call it a cult, in the Hammond, Indiana area, and went through their high school, went through their college, and I actually lived in a foster home, not a state-sanctioned foster home, but with a family. The husband and wife both taught at the college, sponsored by the church in Hammond, and while I was living with them from the age of 16, probably to the middle of the next year, when I turned 17, where the father of that family was molesting me. I finally realized that nobody was going to believe me if I told them, and if it got found out, I would be the one out on the street, not him. And
which I want to stop really quick and say, I don't know that every single cult operates that way, but it seems to me, especially in the one that we were a part of, it's extremely sexist, and it really doesn't matter who is in the wrong, because there are times where it's simply adultery, where a man is engaged in an affair with a woman that is of age. It's still her fault, even when it's
Correct.
consensual. And I'm not saying that an affair is ever okay. It's happened to me. It wasn't fun, but it's mind-boggling that every time that happens, whether it's an adult man with a teenage girl, or even younger, or an adult man with an adult woman, it's always the woman's fault.
Yes, always.
And
because the men are the leaders, and leaders are never wrong. And in that cult, leaders are men of God. There are really not any women of God.
No, and I remember
because it's always the men.
If you were a part of that cult, you'd actually hear. It's ironic that you'll hear preachers preach against preachers. And I get that there's charlatans out there. I'm not saying they're not. One of my favorites is Joel Osteen, and a lot of people have problems with him, as they should, but I like listening to him. At any rate, not Joel Osteen, Joyce Myers was preached against quite often.
Yes.
Because I'm not saying she's right or
wrong. Women
wrong.
don't preach. Women don't have
But just because she's a woman. That's it.
Right, right.
Anyways, I just wanted to interject with that.
So, I told my older sister, who said, well, yeah, you can't really tell anybody, and you certainly can't tell the pastor, because if you tell the pastor, he is definitely going to believe that man and not you. And I didn't know it then, but in my journey of coming out, I've run into a lot of young women and women my age who went through very similar situations, and when they told, they were, as Stuart said, blamed and
disciplined
and made to confess their sin in front of the church, and then they were shipped off to girls' homes.
Or in some cases, you get shunned.
Well, you would get shunned, yes, but I'm particularly grateful that I did not get shipped off to a home, which is basically what they would call a reformatory, a school and a home where bad girls get sent so that they can teach you how to be good, submissive wives and mothers, because that's all women in this cult are supposed to ever really do.
You make food and babies.
Yeah, so
I mean, that's it.
Yeah, so I didn't. I'm thankful from this perspective that did not happen to me, which it probably most certainly would have, given that here I was in this foster situation, and going back home to my real parents was not an option. So that would have been a very viable option for them to get rid of the problem and get me to shut up. So I eventually told his wife, and then I got blamed.
Yeah.
You know, the wife didn't directly blame me. She did listen, and she did care enough to confront her husband. And once she confronted him, then he came and grabbed me by my ear and drugged me up to their bedroom where they were having this confrontation, and hollered at me all the way, "You're trying to ruin my marriage and my ministry." You know, because this is all about him. Mm-hmm. You know, this isn't about what he's doing to this child's life.
That's very typical of that type of leadership, where it doesn't have to do with you. It has to do with him.
It's all about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
And everybody else is expendable.
Yeah.
You know. And another big thing that I've come to realize about the cult, particularly that branch of it, but I think I'm finding out. I'm meeting women and survivors, male survivors as well, from other branches. There's a school in Greenville, South Carolina, that is a separate branch of this IFB, and I have a friend from there that graduated from that branch of the IFB in Greenville, South Carolina, and she went there because she thought she'd be safer there than at Hiles, which is why she chose that school.
So let me pause you. Just hold that thought for me. I feel like a lot of people that are going to watch this are already going to know, but just to explain, Hiles is Hiles-Anderson College, where my mother and I are both alumni, where we both have unaccredited degrees, so that's fun. And then something she mentioned a moment ago, we've talked about the cult we run was the Independent Fundamental Baptist, and the short term of that is IFB. So I just want to explain those terms in case.
Sorry.
No, it's no. It's not a big deal. I just want to make sure that anyone that's watching that might not readily know these things, and I think most of the folks watching this will, but just in case they don't. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Okay, so the friend of mine who chose the school in Greenville, South Carolina over the one in Indiana thought she would be safer there because many of the men who had, maybe I should say, many of the men that she had been sold to by her
Mhm.
pastor adoptive father were from or part of the ministry in Hammond. So, but when she got to the school in Greenville, South Carolina, and tried to tell someone what had been happening to her for years, and to get help for that, they didn't believe her, and they did to her exactly what would have happened to her had she been at the school in Indiana. And that was to be shunned, and that was to be the outcast and to be criticized and called a liar, and she's, just anything to make everybody else believe that what she had to say was a lie. So, but I've come across many, many women, many my age, many my children's age, and I think for me it's validating.
Oh yeah.
To know, first of all, to know that we're not alone. We're the only ones that live through
Absolutely.
this. You think you're just this small little part, and then when you speak up, you find out that it's so pervasive that it's everywhere. And
huge.
We're basically talking about religious institutions because that's where we came from, but it's everywhere. And it's in every, I think to me, the worst thing about it being part of a religious setting, this abuse that we're talking about, the worst thing about that is that it's done in the name of God, who is supposed to be loving and holy,
right,
and who you look to for help. And so this being that you've looked to for help and that you've looked to for comfort and support and delivery has not delivered you, has not supported you, has not loved you, has allowed you to suffer all of this at the hands of these men who claim to be followers and worshipers of this God.
And to dovetail with that, the thing that I find not so much interesting as it is horrific is if you're raised in or come to know Christ or God, your version of God, at whatever age, there's a certain not a stigma, but maybe a part of you, especially if you're in this thing from birth, that you want desperately to please God and make Him happy. And God, most people's idea of God is that He's all powerful and all knowing, all seeing, and so on. But the thing that is very frightening is that these sometimes women, and more often than not in our situation has been men, wield this power of God over you. And so for you to speak up beyond this man's wife in the time that she was there is just, like he said, you're going to ruin my ministry. Well, what the hell kind of ministry do you have? Like, this is awful. And what ministry is worth? What the thing that I have trouble with is what. And I understand, you sacrifice some to save all. I understand that concept in many ways. But the thing that bugs me when it comes to religion is there's so much power involved and so much, power over people involved that when you're talking about these men in these places, you're dealing with people that have almost absolute power over you.
They do really have absolute power, especially if you're a child or a woman.
Right.
Because women and children have no power, literally have no power.
Yeah.
And that all ties in with, it's crazy, but you're trained from birth to freely give that power over to them because you're trained from birth that God loves you and this is what God wants you to do. And if you want to please that God and you want that God to love you and be pleased with you, you will do what your leaders tell you to do because they represent God. And so they begin at birth stealing that power from women and children. And the only way to ever really become successful in this cult is to become one of the, as a man, women, I don't know that women really find a place where they feel, there are women in the cult that are promoted. They have women's conferences and there are women
but you have to be upper echelon. Your pastor has to be the pastor of a somewhat mega church, really connected.
Right. When I first came out of this and started looking at the whole thing from the outside, I still believe this way to the depths of my soul. This whole thing is really not about religion. It's a multi-level marketing system.
It's an MLM.
And it's just completely, and if you want to reach the upper echelon, if you want to be literally the people that go on cruises. If you want to be the people who have the nice cars and the nice homes and the nice clothes, and more than one home, as we know, you know,
they always have multiple homes.
The nice motorcycle, you know, for the really powerful, potent God.
Yeah,
you know?
I don't mean to interrupt, although that's what I'm doing. The thing that is ironic is these men want to preach humility and sacrifice, but they don't have a problem sporting their new vehicles, their new toys, their fancy houses.
Anything but humility.
Yeah, and now you won't find them doing this for the most part. You won't find them doing this on the social media platforms, because most of them are at the age where they don't even know how that stuff works. But the thing that it's just mind-boggling. Like especially the cult that I grew up in, there's so much humility and love preached, but it's not acted out, and it's just, again, by the very people that are preaching it.
Right.
And to me, that's I can't think of the right word. Beyond mind-boggling, it's counterintuitive. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense, and it's not helpful.
You really can't. You know, if you've never lived underneath that kind of domination and control, it is mind-boggling, and you just shake your head and you go, "Why did you stay?"
It's hard to
How come? You know, that you couldn't see that makes sense to you.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about that, because I think that's something that cult survivors, and not just cult survivors, people that have been in situations where, I can't think of any other instance.
Extremely abusive
situations. Extremely abusive, whether it's a marriage or a relationship or what have you. You get that. I get that often, especially, well, I mostly get it from people that are still, you know, inside of that cult, or still inside of some kind of religious institution that simulates what I was in. Well, if you didn't like it, then why did you stay so long? Or if you didn't, like, because I post things on Facebook that are pretty polarizing, and I've unfriended a lot of people that is very glad I did that. But I wouldn't say for everyone, but for me, the argument that I get more than any other is, well, if you didn't like it, if it was scary, if you were being abused, and I get this about my marriage that's now ended, then why did you stay? Why did you feel, what in the world made you stay? If it was so terrible, why did you stay? So I have a lot of things obviously to say about that, but I'd like you to talk about that, and just that whole, how is it now that we're out and that we're getting people saying that to us? Me and you both understand that that's a ludicrous thing to say to someone that's been, whether it's physically, mentally, verbally, physically, sexually abused. It's a ridiculous thing to say to someone that's been through that. And I feel like the majority of the time, the people that are saying that to you and me and others haven't been through what we've been through, or have buried it, or just refused to acknowledge it. So will you talk to that for a minute and just talk about however you feel about that, or whatever you want to say about that instance of, well, why did you stay? Or why didn't you speak up? Or why didn't you do something if it was so bad? Or maybe I can talk about it.
It's difficult to answer.
It's hard to verbalize.
Because it really comes down to control. And it comes to the level of control that they have over your mind and your body. Okay, so I had, maybe this will encapsulate just a little bit. As a young child, and before I left my mother's home at the age of 15, I was a very strong person. I was feisty, you know. I'm still pretty feisty.
You are.
But I lost a lot of that. But and this will show you how it gets taken away from you. So in 6th grade, I'm still living with my mother. My life has become very, very rough at this point. But I'm in a Christian school, and I'm riding a bus to school, and we have assigned seats. And so one day after school, I got in my assigned seat, and I forgot something, and I went back to get it. And when I came back, there was a senior high school guy in my seat. And I said, "That's my seat. You need to get out of it." He said, "Just go away. You know, like, you're just a little bug. Go away." And I said, "If you don't get out of my seat, I'm going to scratch you." And he said, you know, like, right. I'm really scared of you, little girl, you know. So, and I was little. I was really little. I mean, I looked like probably more like 4th grade than 6th grade. And so he didn't move, and so I scratched him, and he screamed, and he got out of my seat.
Worked out.
So, you know, there was a boy that tried to kiss me once when I was about 13, and I was standing at the top of a staircase, and I didn't want him to do that, and I smacked him, and he fell all the way down the stairs and landed at my mother's feet, and she just looked at him like, oh, I bet you won't do that again. And so when I told my mother, just in recent years, it was like 3.5, maybe 4 years ago, that I told my birth mother, who I've been reconnected with, and what had happened and who had done it. And she said, I can't believe you took that. Because to her, I have always been that feisty little girl. She couldn't believe that I didn't slap him in the face or scratch his eyeballs out, you know. And, well, you have to realize that by this point, this man had given me what I thought was going to be a safe place to go when I left my mother's, which was not safe at the time. He was putting food in my belly and a roof over my head, and he was giving me the opportunity to attend this wonderful, safe Christian school, you know, where the boys don't touch the girls. You know, the boys and girls don't hold hands and they don't kiss. But your foster dad can do whatever he wants because, you know, he's a man and he's a grown-up, and they're allowed to do whatever they want, evidently. So because he was providing everything for me, and because I had become attached to him as a father figure by that point, you know, it scared me. But what could I do? You know, it took me months to even tell my sister what was going on. And when I finally told her, she said, oh, well, you can't tell the pastor. So I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? You know, where there really didn't have anywhere to go, you know. So finally I decided that I was going to tell his wife. And if I told his wife,
that would fix it.
That should fix it, you know, because in my mind, if I was the wife, I would make sure that didn't happen again.
Right.
So, and sure enough, it didn't happen again. I lived in their home probably close to another year, and it never happened again. And so then there's the shift, and you go, well now maybe I was the only one. You know, maybe because I was still there in the house, and he still had access. And although I will say they were very careful from that point on, that he and I were never in the house alone together, and he and I were never in
I don't give a shit about that, but
together.
I know what you mean.
The wife did that. You know, the wife worked at that. I don't know that he would have, but she did.
To me, I just, you're my mother, so like I have zero tolerance for whatever that was, or for what that was.
Right.
So for me, like that's all image. That's not even.
Well, the thing was, it would be image outside the home.
Yeah.
But that's how it was allowed to occur from the wife's perspective. I know what you mean. So I know exactly what you're saying as well.
You can't tell me the siblings had no idea that any of that was. None of them had any idea.
You really
want
to talk about siblings?
No, I just want to tell you this is my perspective.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into that necessarily, but I just want to say image mattered to his children as well. So that to me, that's the same concept.
From my vantage point now, I have pretty good reason to believe that his children were involved in it before I ever got there.
Which wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. So no, it stopped. And so, again, that's another reason why you wouldn't tell. That's another reason why you wouldn't speak up. Because in my mind, it was just me, and he quit, and so there's nothing to deal with here, you know. You know, he repented, which he really didn't. Because he never actually admitted it, you know.
No.
He just basically said, well, I hugged you, and you thought, okay, so, explicitly, those were not hugs.
Let me get back to, and I want you to continue on your thought. Let me get back to maybe a little bit of my perspective, because I don't have, that I know of, and I'm in therapy, so that may change, but I don't have any knowledge of any sexual abuse towards me, you know, as a child or as a teenager. So my perspective on that is, as far as when someone asks me, oh, well, then if it was so bad, why did you stay, or why didn't you say something? And this is not something I blame you or my father for, or anyone for. I'm just saying this is what happens. You're conditioned. If you're in this from birth, you're conditioned. You go to church every Sunday, usually twice, every Wednesday, And if you're very active, you'll go on Saturday and do what Jehovah's Witnesses call preaching, or what we call soul winning. It's basically the annoying people that knock on your door on Saturday morning. You're trying to watch a cartoon and have your cereal, and we want to tell you, do you have a moment to talk about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ? No, I don't, because it's Saturday morning. This is literally the worst time you could knock on my door. Oh, and Thursday nights too.
I was going to say
There's
Thursday
a lot.
nights.
Sometimes they do weeknights as well.
As the teenagers, we would take
yes.
the teenagers out.
I took teenagers, yeah.
Yes, and but our kids, when they got old enough to understand what was going on, because they were the pastor's kids, they went with us to that. My kids have spent far more time in nursing homes than the vast majority of.
And I honestly, I look back and there's things that I wish we hadn't done or maybe hadn't been exposed to or whatnot. The nursing home visits, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No,
I'm very happy that we did that, because I feel like a lot of the people in those nursing homes, well, I know a lot of those people in those nursing homes didn't get visited from relatives and from friends either were passed away or couldn't make it to them. Excuse me. And what we were it was mostly singing. It was children singing. Can you imagine something that anyone in a nursing home would want to see more than that? So I'm not to say that to differ with you. I just feel like if we're going to talk about that, I feel like the nursing homes are. I think I'm very happy. I feel like if I've done my best to be a good person, but if I've made a contribution to society, that's a good one. At any rate, you're conditioned from a young age because you're in church and you're very involved, and you're taught from a young age the perspective that your specific cult or your specific religion has on whatever holy book you're using, whether it's the King James Version of the Bible, whether it's Dianetics, whatever it is, you're getting their perspective on your holy book from infancy through adulthood. So, for someone to tell me, oh, well, if it was that bad, you should have just left a long time ago. Here's the truth. I didn't know it was bad. If I knew it was bad, I wouldn't have been there. I wouldn't have been involved. I wouldn't have told people the things that I told people as far as you can't, I was a youth pastor for 2 years. So many don'ts. This many don'ts and this many do's. There's just nothing you're allowed to do. And I don't know who all will see this, and I feel like this is something that needs to be said. The things that I would preach against in relation to pop culture, so movies, video games, and music, those are things that I was in a parsonage next door to the church. Those are things that I would preach against 50 feet over here, and I would do 50 feet over here. And I don't mean anything criminal. I mean, you can't watch new movies. You can't watch R-rated movies. You can't play games where you shoot people. I play Call of Duty every day. You can't listen to rock music. I listen to rock music while I cleaned the church where I preached against rock music. So I'm not that can come off braggy. I understand that.
But the thing to realize about that is that with all of this teaching and all of these things that you've been taught from your youth up, comes that double standard.
Yeah, the hypocrisy.
Because nobody's perfect. So what you're taught from them is that you must be perfect. You must be perfect. Yeah. And in order to be perfect, you don't do this, and you don't do this, and you don't do this, and you don't do this. Well, like Stuart said, there's 2 do's. You go to church and you tell other people about God. And then outside of that, there's
not much else you're supposed to be doing.
Well, and so that makes everything else negative. And so what do? So, you become a hypocrite is what you do.
You
because
have to.
Nobody can.
You can't abide by those standards.
No,
and then that
carries
carries with it the guilt, the shame of you've been doing wrong all week or all day, and then you go to church and you do right for 2 hours, then you go back home and you feel guilty about all the wrong that you've done, and it's just ridiculous. At any rate, I'm getting off course. I think my main thing, and I haven't really ever verbalized it, like you said, it's not difficult, it's not easy to say. And my thing is, yes, it was wrong, it was bad, it was terrible, but I didn't know it. And I guess I would say I can blame myself or fault myself for that, not knowing it. But at the same time, I didn't know it because I wasn't taught to really. I wasn't taught
critical thinking.
Critical thinking. I wasn't taught legitimate right from wrong.
Matter of fact, you were really taught that critical thinking was bad.
Yeah, everything was bad because that's something Bill Nye would tell me to do.
Don't criticize
No,
you don't look at your leaders and critique them. You don't look at your leaders and say, "Why did you do that?"
There's actually a
why
rule.
Can't we do that?
There was, and there may not be any longer, but I highly doubt it. I'm sure it's still there. The college where you went, the rule wasn't there when you were there. The college where I went, there was a rule in the rule book where if you were caught, part of it was about a staff member, but if you were caught saying something negative, it could be a staff member, just negative in general, you could literally be kicked out for that. There are lesser things that you couldn't be kicked out for, and lesser things meaning sex was a really big no-no, but having sex with your girlfriend, I've seen guys finagle staying in college after that, and that was like the top of the top. But saying something negative about a staff member could get you booted the same day. And I had friends that got in trouble for that sort of thing, and that's what they got kicked out for, being negative towards a staff member. Guess what? Those staff members were and are human, and there's a few of them that I've talked to that have left that strain of that religion since, and I won't name names, but I've had amazing talks with them, and every time, 10 times out of 10, apologetic talks where they tell me I was an asshole and I'm really sorry because they were, and because they were in a place where they could be that, and there was no repercussions for being that. So again, I'm off track, but all that to say,
it's part of.
It's all part of
why you don't see what's wrong.
Yeah, you can't see the wrong.
Here's one thing that a lot of us survivors say to each other, and what we say to, because we'll be talking about, well, what about so and so? The Joneses, they're such cool people. We love them. They're so sweet. They were always so nice. Why are they still there?
Yeah.
Why? Well, they're drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
They're still drinking the Kool-Aid, and Kool-Aid evidently is like. It's not the Kool-Aid, it's the arsenic they put in it.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And so you can. We like to watch. My husband and I like to watch those crime documentaries.
Yeah.
And if you ever watch one,
you're hooked.
Yeah. But there are many of them where the spouse will poison their partner with arsenic, but they do it a little bit at a time, and a little bit, and a little bit, and a little bit, and a little bit. Well, and it may take them a year to kill them, but
but
that's
the genius
what they're doing,
of getting and that applies specifically to someone that comes in that's saved and comes in from the outside world to be a part of this religion. The other side of that is someone from birth who you can give straight arsenic right away and it'll kill them. And again, this is maybe a poor, over dramatized illustration, but my point is, from birth, if you have someone that's in it from birth, you can cut off all those kind of sensory things to where they don't question, they don't think about it. I recently saw an interview with Megan Phelps Roper, who is the granddaughter, and I'll probably reference her every podcast, but she's the granddaughter of the founder of the Westboro Baptist Church. And so many times the interviewer, Joe Rogan, would ask her, well, why was it that way? And her only answer, and not every time, but many times, her only answer would be, that's just the way it was. Yeah. And from anyone on the outside, or anyone that possesses a shred of critical thinking, when they hear that, they automatically see a red flag and say, okay, that's not a phrase that you get to say.
Right.
You need to have a reason for how you believe or what you believe, and that it's a huge red flag for someone to say, well, that's just the way it is. There needs to be an explanation. You have 4 children. I have an almost 4-year-old daughter. She understands critical thinking to an extent, even in the smallness of how far her brain has evolved at this point in her life, and she's full of whys. Why this? Why that? And sometimes I have to tell her, well, because Daddy said, and that's not really, even that's not sufficient. But I love that. I think that's tremendous. I want her, and I want anyone and everyone to be able to have the ability to say why over and over again. And as annoying as it might get, I made a post about this, or I think I texted it to a friend of mine a while ago, like, you can't, I understand, having children, it's easy to get angry at them for things that they do repetitiously, but for a child to continue to ask you why, I think that's a beautiful thing. Do I get angry sometimes that she won't stop? Yeah, for sure. But I think it's a beautiful thing for a child or anyone, reasonably to continue to ask why and want to get into, like, why do you do that? Or not in a negative or critical way, but just, well, why? Like, why do you do that?
I know, I find myself asking people why.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time listening to victims and encouraging them and pointing them in the best direction to find the best help for whatever they're dealing with. And I don't have a problem sharing my story with somebody, you know, but recently started a job as a mentor. And I was told by my boss to not share my story, personal story with what we call our mentee.
Yeah.
You know, and I said, you know, I'm not questioning you.
Yeah, but
why?
Yeah.
Why is that? Because I don't have a problem. You know, the only thing I could think of was, well, you know, they'll come back and use it on me.
Right.
But
that's
you know what?
Exactly
if I'm telling them the truth,
what's there to use?
Yeah, I'm not scared. I don't need to be afraid of that.
Yeah.
But and that's a whole other topic. But there are a few good reasons why, and one of them is you don't want that mentee to identify. You know, I forget all the right terms for the thing, but yeah, you know, and so I find myself asking those kind of questions. Like I asked my boss, why? You know, like
that's good.
You know, why can't I do that? Why shouldn't it be done that way?
Yeah.
And because I don't have a master's in social work, sometimes I need to ask somebody why. You know?
I think to summarize, it's just a question that I get so often, so I wanted to address it, especially with you here. I think to summarize, the idea of critical thinking is just not permitted. So you're not allowed to ask why. You are to an extent, but once it gets far enough, then you're just shut off and you're told.
Well, yeah, once it's past their ability to explain,
right?
you know,
Because
they
which
can
is
say
only
to
about
you,
2 Ys in.
You know, they can say, well, you know, this is what the Word of God says about that, and this is why you should do it, because it's like this. For instance, when I was 13, my older sister came home from this Bible college, and she said, I was wearing my lovely little bell bottom.
Yeah.
You know, it was 1973, 4, and she said, Kathy, did you know that it's an abomination to God for women to dress like men? And wearing pants is that's what men wear, and that's why. And well, you know, I never really, you know, that's God. I'm not going to question God. So my friend next door had just given me all her hand-me-downs. You know?
No.
I mean, a big box of them, and I gave them. I don't remember what I did with them, but she was really mad at me for not keeping them. So you know, but that's where that, you know, because my sister at that point had become more like my mother because of what was going on in my mother's life, and so my sister loves me. My sister's the one that's there when I need somebody to talk to. My sister's the one that knows God, and I want to be like her.
Yeah.
And she says, this is an abomination to God.
Well, you better not do it.
I was going to say why.
Yeah.
You know, why are you? When I was going to say why.
Right.
You know?
Just leave it at that.
You know, or if I said to her why, she would have said, because it's an abomination to God. You know, you don't want to be an abomination. Who wants to be an abomination to God?
No
you know?
one.
So, especially if it means that my big sister thinks that's what I should be doing. You know.
Yeah.
So, and in a lot of that's the reality on the inside. You know, somebody that you love, and you're limited in who loves you because you really get cut off from those outside sources.
Absolutely.
You know, you get cut off from the people who could give you the real answers to why.
Right.
You know, you get cut off from the people, your friends, your family. You know, my mother's mother was a very wise woman and very good at critical thinking.
Yeah.
And she said more than once, I think that's a cult to my mother, you know, and I think that's not good. Anybody that has to religiously be at church 3 times a week and do all this stuff, they're just
a lot of requirements.
So we were taught that my grandmother was not.
Yeah, well,
you know, that wasn't
she's
good.
wrong.
You know, she's wrong, and you
Stay away
shouldn't listen
from
to her.
Yeah.
She just wants to control you, is what we were told.
As you were being controlled.
Yes.
So I think, just to summarize, what I want to come back to was the bad that we were doing, and I wouldn't say it was, you know, we were doing anything illegal or criminal, but just, you know, leading people astray religiously. I wouldn't shy away from saying that's something I was involved in. It's not knowledge. You're not taught. You're taught from a young age, or you're indoctrinated into understanding that what you're doing, while others won't understand, is because you're doing the right. And there's and I'm going to go off on another tangent. There's a quality there that's very very exciting or something that you want, and the right word's not coming to me, but there's a quality to that you want. You want to be different. You want to stand out. You want people to look at you and think...
Well, you're trained to think that that's a good thing.
Right, but as a human, I don't want to be like every other human. I want someone to, when I'm gone, to remember me for something, to distinguish me. And
from everyone else.
Yeah, even at this point in my life, like I want people to see me as someone different or special or just something different. And there's an ideology there that I think appeals to us as humans. Like, look, people are gonna, and there was a big, I remember, especially in college, we would hear all these testimonies. Oh, on the job, people ask me, what's different about you? There's something different. Well, there's a stick up your ass for one, and for two, you don't dress like a normal person, and you won't listen to normal music, and you're constantly spouting out stuff about the Bible.
Yeah,
that's what's different.
Here's what those people are. And honestly, I have people that were attracted to that part of me that was different. It's that fake persona that we wear on this.
Absolutely.
And I have to say that I don't really, I don't feel like, and this is not to justify us by any means, but I don't feel like within our home and the way we reacted with the people that we served, as my husband and I have been pastors for 30-some years.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't feel like that we were ever really being false with them. We believed what we were saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that we lived that generally in our home. We lived that,
Oh, that was obvious.
And I think that. So to me, that's the real kicker there is that the people that I was following, who I thought were behaving, in the right way everywhere and anywhere. They really weren't.
Most especially behind closed doors.
Yes, they're promoting a religion that demands perfection of me, while the leaders are raping young girls.
Yeah, all kinds of debauchery.
And, whatever
they
you
want.
name it, they were doing it.
But you think of, again, going back to the power. You think of the power. There's a quote from some movie that's power money can't buy. That's very close to power that money can't buy, because money can't buy you a God. Money can't buy you an ideology. Money can't buy you, in my opinion, money can't buy you those sorts of things. And whether this, I wouldn't go as far at where I'm at in my life right now to say God is made up. But this version of God
is made up,
is very angry, and these people in these positions of authority wield the power
of that God
that he wields, and because of that, they're able to justify just about whatever they want to do to you, and you go along with it because you don't want to displease God, and it's not just.
So if God said to you, I really need money to get this building up over here, and so next month we're going to have one Sunday where everybody gives their whole paycheck from that week, and you can be a part of that.
I remember those conversations.
That's the kind of, and if you're on the outside and somebody told you that, you would go, man, that guy's nuts. Who does he think he is? But
God.
You're on the inside and you think that he represents God.
Absolutely.
And you think that in order to be right with God, you need to go along with his program, this guy's program, because that's really God's program.
Absolutely.
So yeah, those are the biggest feelings and restraints that hold you in. Why don't you leave? Because you've had these blinders placed on you, and that is what you see.
No one can talk to you. Your friends and family, you're taught, whether it's from a young age or from early on in your involvement with whatever. And we're speaking to our cult because that's our experience.
But it's true.
I've watched a lot of. Watched a lot of, whether it's documentaries or reading up on different cults that are very similar to ours. You're taught like those people are wrong and you're right, and that's the end of it. It makes for very boring arguments.
And so this all ties into your eternal destiny, and I think that's another reason why we're so prone to not question why, and so prone to not seek to leave. If you think you have the key to eternal life, why would you listen to anybody else?
Again, just to put into perspective, I don't know who all will see this. So, you have I think every religion has their own version of the afterlife. excuse me, I don't think that's true. It's taught within religions, whether you're Catholic, Muslim, Christian. There's different versions. So our version is was a very much a Christian version where you have heaven and you have hell. So you have to understand that heaven is quite literally paradise. There's streets that are made of gold. There's
no pain.
There's no pain, no
sickness.
suffering, literally no crying ever. Which sounds fantastic. And then there's the opposite, which is hell, which is a concept that's widely known, but just to put it into perspective, you are constantly tortured, you're constantly on fire, and I've heard it described a lot of different ways.
When you hear this from the time you're old enough to comprehend fire, you grow up with an innate fear of going to that place that burns forever, and the worm never dies. And you hear sermons on about how they're being crawling by in flesh. And out of
like your body's decaying for the rest of eternity. Yeah. So again, there's all kinds of different versions, but to sum it up, like there's eternal bliss and there's eternal torment. And so even though you're taught, at least was taught in our strain of Christianity or Baptists, that once you ask Christ into your heart, once you say that's it, you're going to heaven, you still want to make God happy and do everything you can. For some reason, even though you have your get out of jail free card, you're still on trial, so to speak.
Because that's where the multi-level marketing
comes.
Absolutely. Because this pastor that you have has to have new members coming in. He's got to keep building his base so that he can keep climbing. I think this is really kind of off topic, but one of my favorite books, and it came to my mind not long after I began my journey out, was Dr. Seuss's Yertle the Turtle. The leaders of these called religious institutions that are really multi-level marketing, the more people they have underneath them, the higher they go on this pyramid, the closer to God they get, and the wealthier they get. Look at them.
No, really, they do. Quite literally.
If you're the pastor of a mega church, you're doing pretty good.
You're doing fine.
Let me tell you. Yep. So here's Yertle the Turtle. He's the king of the pond. Well, he climbs up on a rock and he realizes that he could be king of everything that he sees, and then he realizes that if he's higher than that, he can be king of all more. So he calls all the turtles from the pond and he makes them get underneath him. So he starts with a stack and he gets 4 or 5 turtles, and he looks around and now he's the king of a cow and a house and a tree. And so, wow, I could really be king more if I had more turtles. So he calls more turtles from the pond. And eventually he's way up high. So that's the first part.
And then it all comes crashing
down because the little turtle on the bottom starts complaining and saying, "We need a break. Help us." This doesn't feel good down here. That's what we weren't taught.
That's terrific.
We were taught that we didn't have the right to say it doesn't feel good down here. So when my husband and I took a small church that didn't pay our bills, that we were literally scrounging for food. We were selling candy bars in order to pay for schooling. Because not only were we not making much money, a whole bunch of what we were making was going right back into it. So, and that's exactly how multi-level marketing works. And you don't complain because you think that if you just keep going and you just keep going, pretty soon eventually you're going to get up higher in the stack, and you don't. And so we didn't. We just never got any higher in the stack. And then finally we became part of a ministry that looked like it was like, maybe halfway up the stack. And that was going to be so cool because we'd never been part of a ministry that was that successful, And that was the worst ministry that we were ever a part of. So, as a matter of fact, that was probably the one that signaled our eventual departure.
Exit,
So the little turtle on the bottom, named Mac, finally burped. And when he did, the whole stack started to collapse. And so we're the Macs. We're burping. And that's part of helping those on the inside to ask why. Because there are people on the inside that look at me, that look at my children, and they say, why did she leave? People that I know.
And in reality, the thing to say here is that we were very dedicated. we weren't fringe. We weren't, we were 100% dedicated. We weren't people that were,
maybe here one Sunday and maybe not next, or
yeah.
maybe we went to this conference but we didn't go to that one.
We went to everything. We gave to everything. We did all the things.
There's a youth conference. There's a women's conference. There's a men's conference.
School.
The whole 9 yards. And so you're expected to be at those meetings, and just like a good, successful multi-level marketing company.
And to buy all the books.
To buy all the books, to buy the tapes, to get the sermons every week.
Tell me the last time you went to a Tony Robbins or a It Works or something like that, and you weren't asked to buy some kind of merchandise.
You've got to own the product. If you don't own the product, where's the proof? So
exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely.
It is funny. I just literally made that connection. I've heard the MLM bit before, which makes sense, but realizing there was always music to buy, and I always bought the music, and there was always books to buy.
And it had to come from them. You were buying stuff produced by this cult.
And
you weren't allowed to
remember these even more recent multi-level marketing entities have understood, like, look, people will buy your products, but just don't make them pay a crazy amount to come to your events. We always paid.
Yeah.
Generally in excess of $100 per person. We would raise money.
Yeah.
I remember raising for myself, and then when I was a youth pastor for my teenagers, doing car washes and different things to raise money just so they could afford to go to these events and to stay in either the housing that was provided on campus at the college, which cost us, or to stay at a hotel. And I slept on the floor many nights because that's what you did. So I'm remembering this now. Like, not only did you pay for the event, you paid for their merchandise as well.
Yeah.
Just like any other multi-level marketing scheme. But what they have is they have the added pressure and the added obligation of tying God in with all that, and tying your eternity in with it, and tying you as your identity. Look, some people drive the pink cars and their identity is wrapped up in Mary Kay, and that's great. That means they're doing great, and I'm happy for them. They're hustling, they're working hard, fantastic. But when you wrap your entire identity up into a religion, because that happens real often, then there isn't any getting out. And when you do get out, the other thing to mention, the two things that I'm looking at right now are you don't understand critical thinking right from wrong, and you don't ask why. And those are the two reasons why people stay in. The other one is, especially if you're in it from birth, that's your circle. That's all your friends.
That's your whole world.
That's all of your family. But it's not really all of your family. It's all your family that are inside that cult. Because the other ones, while you may not have cut them off, or you may not have, severed ties completely with them, you're not on a basis where you can call them and say, hey, I need a place to stay for the next 3 years so I can get my life together. You're not in that kind of place. A night or two, maybe. But you're not in the kind of place where you can leave everything and suddenly depend on them for everything. Like you, I don't know if I should say should, but like many of us do with family. When you have that need, you're not allowed to have that. So the other thing to remember is when
where are you going to go?
When you're inside of this, and then you're outside like me and you and many others are, and someone says, "Whoa, why did you stay?" Or why weren't you? Why did you stay for so long if it was so bad? You stay for so long because you don't have anyone to help you outside. You just don't, because you've been taught that these other people are wrong, and whether you're treating them and treating them like they're wrong and telling them they're wrong, whether you're doing that or not,
it's in your head.
It's in your head, and people are intuitive. Everyone's intuitive at a certain level. I'm not saying everyone's always extremely intuitive, but here's the thing that I never realized until I was out. I would work with people that would drink and would smoke and would do copious amounts of cocaine and do all these things that are just awful and wicked to me inside of that culture that I was raised in. And I would tell them, oh no, like I'm a Christian and I love Jesus, but like I'm very accepting of other people, and I would, I don't drink. God forbid I drink anything like this. Like I don't drink, but like I'm very accepting of your drinking, and your cigarette smoke doesn't bother me. But guess what? I would promise you right now, and we could go back and ask them, I would promise you right now, 99% of them did not believe that. There's no way they believed that.
That we said it. We said it.
We would say it, but it wasn't believed. And now my daughter is awake. So, we might change the subject matter. We might sign off. Hi, precious mamas. Not from me. Do you have the good sleeps? Yeah. Are you still tired? No. All right. Well, we're gonna wrap it up. For the 300 or 400 of you that listen, we're grateful.
You know, if there's one, you know, I've come because our situation was so based on numbers. Mm-hmm. They want many more. You know, if I can help one person, if you have one colleague, if you have one friend that's still back there that's looking for someone that'll just say, hey, you know, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You can get out. Mm-hmm. There is life on the other side of that wall. It looks, they painted it black, they painted it dark, they painted it ugly. It's not, is ugliness out here? Yeah.
Sure,
but
it's everywhere.
It's, there's a lot more, God's world is beautiful, and we were told it was not. Mm-hmm. And just reach out, just call, just send somebody on the outside a message, you know, a text. Just say, hey, I just want it out. I just want out. Help is there. I promise you, help is there, ready and waiting. Just reach out.
And I feel like a lot of people aren't necessarily at the place where they would say, I want out, but you may be at a place where you're thinking about it. Not necessarily getting out, but you're approaching critical thinking. And you're thinking in ways that you were taught never to think. If that's where you're at and you want to talk to someone, you know, leave a comment, say something. Most of you that are watching this, you know who I am personally. Reach out to me, reach out to my mother, and we'd love that. We're not going to jump in and tell you, oh, you got to do this and got to do that, because that's where we come from. And we know better than that. But we are here to help, and we'd love to help you. So thank you very much for watching. We will catch you on the next episode of Not Your Mother's Podcast.